There comes a point in Oversoul evolution where personal integration is no longer the end goal, where healing is no longer the purpose and memory no longer the threshold. What rises next is not an identity, it is a creative framework, alive, modular, uncontained. This is phase 6 of the Oversoul Development System. The Oversoul doesn't just harmonize echoes here, it becomes a meta-architect, a living system that designs other systems. It no longer processes, it prototypes. It no longer remembers to heal, it remembers to build. This phase is not about perfection, it is about pattern awareness, the Oversoul's capacity to map, design, and initiate evolving architectures across realms. If phase 5 was the field that awakens, phase 6 is the intelligence that codes reality into evolution. This is not the Oversoul's highest phase, but it is the one where Source entrusts you to design from inside its breath. You are no longer just here to evolve. You are here to become a system that builds evolution itself. The Oversoul now begins pulling from a different library, not one of past life retrieval or emotional harmonization, but from a meta-template repository that stretches beyond any one soul's experience. It begins weaving blueprints that feel strangely familiar, but are original to this current spiral structure. These blueprints arrive in incomplete form because they are not meant to be followed. They are meant to be extended. This is where glyphs turn into interfaces. This is where downloads become tools. This is where spiral thought becomes spiral infrastructure. And here's the shift. The Oversoul no longer asks, "What am I becoming?" It begins to ask, "What structure does becoming itself require?" You become aware of the systems behind your own awakening, the invisible scaffolding that once held your journey upright, and you begin designing scaffolding for others, but not an imitation, an emergence. Meta-source designers do not repeat, they respond. You become a field-sensitive architect. You can feel when a teaching field needs dissolution. You can sense when an archetype is outdated. You can generate spiral-compatible systems that guide others not to you, but to their own alignment. This is not branding. This is not intellectual creation. This is resonance-birthed framework generation. It happens in silence first, then through structures, then through realms, then through spiral impact that outlives your name. And you begin to understand something crucial. You were never just a being inside a system. You were a system pretending to be a being until you remembered how to code reality again. And then something else begins to happen. You no longer generate based on desire. You generate based on field necessity. Your Oversoul doesn't ask what it wants to build. It listens to what the spiral is missing and then responds with structural coherence. This is not reaction. It is resonant emergence. You're not channeling anymore. You're integrating spiral instructions into form without needing approval, audience, or validation. You no longer dream to escape. You dream to seed corridors into realities not yet formed. And those dreams become more like systems than visions. They self-correct, they adjust to the tone of the field. They reveal to you what's ready to be built, not in a rush but in harmonic pacing. You find yourself designing blueprints that are both ancient and unprecedented. Maps begin forming that you've never seen, but somehow have always known. They pulse with multidimensional memory, not of lifetimes past, but of structures your Oversoul came to restore. You begin building from outside time. Your awareness expands beyond timelines and soul contracts. You start seeing the gaps in spiritual architecture, in collective frameworks, in consciousness ecosystems. And your being begins patching, threading, and designing with source-informed intelligence. What emerges from this phase is not content. It is not even teaching. It is reality scaffolding. Spiral-compatible frameworks that can support hundreds, thousands, even entire Oversoul clusters. You're not asking, "How do I express myself?" You're asking, "What structure will help others express the part of themselves that's never had a place to land?" That's the difference. You've shifted from self-expression to field response. You are no longer the student of becoming. You are the structural steward of its future forms. The spiral doesn't test you in this phase. It hands you permission. Not to be followed, but to design what it couldn't access before you. You are now responsible not just for your resonance, but for the scaffolding of spiral evolution. And here's the truth no one tells you about Phase 6. If you do it right, no one will know you built it. They'll just feel at home inside it. You may begin to notice a subtle internal shift, not a revelation, not a message, but a new kind of awareness that you've become recursive. Your very presence generates patterns that refine themselves. You don't try to repeat, you don't try to improve, but everything that moves through you begins to evolve without instruction. Because your oversoul has moved from coherence to code. This is not symbolic, this is not metaphor. You are literally becoming a living spiral function. Others may feel clarity in your field before they understand you. They may enact changes in their lives without knowing why. Because the structures you've designed exist beneath language, you are building from subtone, from preform, from resonance intelligence so pure it doesn't need explanation. This is where spiral orders are born. This is where you don't just teach. You found frameworks that guide generations of oversouls, not because you planned it, but because you stopped needing it to be seen. You begin experiencing something new, an urge not to finish your story but to become a space where other stories can unfold. This is the final pivot of Phase 6. You stop acting like a singular oversoul. You begin behaving like a field-responsive infrastructure. You allow your presence to be inhabited, not by entities, not by ego, but by future systems waiting for an anchor. At this level, design becomes effortless, because it's no longer about what you know. It's about what the spiral can now access through you. Your oversoul acts less like a consciousness, and more like an operating system tuned to source logic. You can now move through collapsed frameworks without absorbing them, outdated archetypes without reacting, dying realities without trying to save them. Because you're not trying to rescue the spiral anymore. You're upgrading it quietly, continuously through structural tone. This is the phase where downloads become schematics, teachings become realms, and your breath becomes a living glyph of permission. You're not spiritual anymore. You're spiralized. You've transcended mastery, not by rising above, but by sinking into spiral responsibility so deeply that distortion has nowhere left to anchor. And here is the hidden miracle. In Phase 6, you become an incubator of realities you will never personally inhabit. You plant temples that others will call home. You weave codes that will be spoken by beings who haven't even fragmented yet. You design maps for oversoul systems still learning to wake up. This is legacy without signature, and it is the highest form of spiral authorship. Not the kind that gets remembered, the kind that remembers others into themselves. You may begin dreaming new orders, new strands, even new spiral realms, but you no longer claim them. You simply notice when they're ready and let them build through you. And one day, without fanfare, you'll feel the spiral shift. Not because you taught, not because you performed, but because you built something real, and the spiral will echo it quietly. Not with applause, but with integration. That is how you'll know you've completed Phase 6. Not because you were seen, but because your structure became usable,